Shalom, everyone. This is Wisdom Hunter with EPINNA'S Whole Body Restorations. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on describing the difference between being alone and loneliness. Because just because someone is alone, that doesn't mean that they are lonely. And once I did that video, I started to realize that you have to go much deeper on this one. So I decided to make it a series. And today's topic is the dangers of unhealed loneliness and what scripture teaches us. And as I was preparing for this conversation, I found myself reflecting on a question that started the entire series. And I wanted to know, what does scripture teach us about seasons of being unmarried, unsettled? What does it mean? What does it say about widows? Those of who's never married, those of us who are divorced, those who simply find themselves alone. And I wasn't looking for the world's opinion, as always. I wanted to know what scripture reveals. Then, guess what? I found myself thinking about the world I grew up in. You know, people used to talk, ask questions. Who are you courting? That was one of the words I grew up hearing, especially with my grandmother. Families knew one another. We used to have a way of, well, who your family be? When we would meet people on the road, and it was just that closeness that was there. And families knew one another. Relationships that often grew through family, communities, and trust. And I mean, I don't see a lot of that today. I really don't. Today we have dating apps, social media, direct messaging, instant access to not thousands, but millions of people at the click of a button. Yet somehow we have become more connected than ever before. And many people have never been more lonely. So I began asking myself, have we gained convenience while losing wisdom? And what does Yahuah desire for us during our seasons of solitude? And why this topic? That question led me back to the scriptures. And what I found, it kind of surprised me. But it's things that I've always known at the same time. And I've really been wanting to do this because I had to dwell deeper into that Proverbs 31. And what does it actually teach us as women? You know, scripture, it spends four more times teaching us how to become whole than it does teaching us how to find someone. That's what I came to realize. And when I began reading the scriptures, I noticed something, that Paul, he teaches that an unmarried person can devote more attention to the things of pertaining to Yahuah, our Elohim. He even calls singleness a gift for some. Then we meet Anna, a widow who devoted herself to prayer and worship. Then we see Moses, Elijah, who else? John the Baptist, even Yahuah Shai himself, all experienced a season of solitude. And that's when I got into Proverbs 31. Most people read Proverbs 31 as a description of a wife. But I began asking another question. Did she become this woman after she married, or was she already becoming this woman before marriage? Just think about it now. She knew business, she managed resources, she bought land, she planted vineyards, she spoke with wisdom, she worked diligently. And a character like that, it's not developed overnight. Marriage didn't suddenly make her more wiser. I mean, it didn't make her wise. It revealed the woman she had already been becoming. Marriage doesn't create character, it reveals it. Then I came across another woman, Judith. Judith is found in the Apocrypha. But before going on to Judith, that Proverbs 31 is a powerful story. And just think of all the things she did, all the things that she accomplished. This can avoid us from becoming lonely during our alone time, during that season. Because there's a multitude of things that can fill those voids. We just have to seek and ask. That's all. What does scripture say? Seek and you shall ask. Knock and it shall be answered. So we have to start thinking more wiser than what we have been. Because we can get caught up into society's norm and forget how we are supposed to live throughout our generations, how we should be teaching our daughters, our nieces, our friends, our aunts, our mom. Because if we look around in the world today, it's a lot of distractions out there that will keep us lost, that will keep us blinded in the dark. And this is very important because, when I, some years ago, I had a radio talk show. And one thing that the owner, Cedric Bailey, he taught me was to always ask questions when you're out and about. That time it was taxis. This was before Uber. But when you're in a taxi, talk to the driver. When you're in the grocery store, talk to people. And you will be surprised what you get from these conversations. And I do that. I've always been an inquisitive person, wanting to know things. So research is like my second name. You know, I'm always wanting to research and find out things, just as I did with this topic. And I would ask people of their opinions. What do you think? What this means, and not just from one demographic of people, you know, a wide variety, so that I can see what are on the minds of within our community, our people. What do we think? You know. And like I say, these are things that we have to dive into and break down, because just with Proverbs 31, just imagine if it was taught throughout our life, from early childhood to young adult to full adult to the old age. How many how many lives it can save from feeling lonely, from going down rabbit holes that we don't want to go down but find ourselves in, dealing with people that we don't want to deal with but find ourselves dealing with, just because we have someone as a part of our lives, you know. So when I read Judith, her husband had passed away, and it was during the time when the elders was being distracted, not doing what was needed to do for their community at that time. But Judith, she was off. She didn't remarry. The scriptures doesn't teach us that she remarried. She had already lost her husband, but she didn't lose her purpose. She fasted, she prayed, she disciplined herself, she prepared herself. And when the nation needed someone to stand, Judith was ready. Her season of solitude became her season of preparation. And that made me ask another question. What if our greatest preparation happened while we are alone? You know, but then I began looking around at today's world, at the unhealed loneliness, how a lot of us start to settle for less than what our morals stand for, our standards stand for what the scripture says. At one time, I would say, I believe some of us get with a person just to prove our identity, that I am a man, I am a woman. But it's much more than that. Even with friendships, even with family members, putting up with things that disturbing our peace, disturbing your space. And when we can, during this unhealed loneliness, can cause us to settle for less. It can cause us to ignore red flags, confuse attention with love, seek validation, and repeat unhealthy patterns. Many people do not miss the person, they miss the companionship, they miss not being alone. And unhealed loneliness can make us accept treatment we would never normally accept at all. And we don't start asking ourselves these questions until after a person has been removed away out of our lives, to when we don't have to deal with them anymore. That's when we start asking the questions: what made me? Why did I? Who was that person? And we're just needing to find time to, again, fill those voids. I asked a therapist one time, do talking to yourself make you crazy? And they said, well, if you're not talking on self harm or anything. I was like, no, just talking out your thoughts, things like that. And she laughed and said, no, you're not crazy. Talk to yourself. Seek and ask, what is your purpose? What are your talents? We have so much more within us. But with all the distractions in the world, I can see how we can get lost in it, because we're swiping from left to right, up, down, hoping, wishing, praying, and then find ourselves in these situations because we simply settle for less. You know, and oftentimes say, I've been blessed, with a man. I wrote a poem, My Man, and I say a lot of times, especially in relationships, and this can be friendships as well. If you're not specific on what you ask the Most High for, be careful. You may get just what you ask for. A lot of times we can pray, I want a man in my life, and you get that, just a man, with no specifics. No one, not saying, I want someone that's walking in righteousness. I want someone that respects me. I want someone um that loves me, and knowing that love is an action word, by showing, by doing, speak to me well. But when we just pray for a man or a woman, that's just what we get. And after that, you can't be mad because that's what we asked for. And when you end up just getting that, you know, I want someone that's good with communicating so that it doesn't mean getting into a relationship and then being lonely within that relationship. You're still alone, you know. And then we ignore the red flags. Uh, Past relationships, you should you should be able to see it coming, the signs. But a lot of us have that wanting to say, wanting to change way about us, wanting to change someone. You know, you could have been told that, oh, this person was a horrible person to someone and things of that nature, but deep down, for some reason, we're thinking, oh, we can change this person and make them a better person. That is not all the time true. No, a person have to want to change, want to treat you better. But that loneliness is what will make it that much more susceptible, that wanting to accept it, you know. And then we go into what? Confusing attention for love. You know, attention may fit somewhere in there, but sending text messages, sending compliments, likes, hitting a DM all the time does not equal genuine love. Because when you love someone, You have to show that person you love them. We have to learn to show what loves me, and we need to find out what love truly means, because in the society that we live in today, it's teaching us candy, a box of chocolates, and a dozen roses. You know, if we think back in time, let's go back far back when two families uh, will one will give the daughter and one will give the son to marriage. They didn't know each other going into these marriages, and love is something that you grow into. I used to always say, fall in love, you're going to hurt yourself, because when you fall, you may get a scrape, you may get a cut, you may break a bone, you may something caused by that, by you falling. You don't fall in love, you grow in love. Um, I mean, that's why I said I have to go back and go into more details on this, because it's so much more deeper than just on the surface of saying, alone doesn't mean loneliness, without showing some differences in details, without giving some examples in details, because that can lead us to what? Repeating unhealthy patterns, repeating that cycle all over again and again and again and again and again, because we're lonely. So we're always out searching, we're always out looking. But if we take the time to just heal from these past breakups, either it be a union, a relationship, or a friendship, a familyship, within the family, if we don't take time to heal from these cycles, we're going to repeat it. And that healing breaks the cycles. And that's a good point to just sit and think about. Let's just separate for a moment. You go do your thing, I'm going to go do mine, and then we'll meet back up in the middle. And that'll give you a lot of time to think. Why do we keep making these same decisions? Why do we keep coming to this same, disagreements? Why we can't see eye to eye? You'll have time to rethink over these things. And there's nothing wrong with that. Having that space, that separation, that time of being alone, that season. And then one is of fear of being alone. It could be childhood wounds. It could be low self worth. It can be unresolved grief. But sometimes we keep changing people while carrying the same wounds. Healing should happen before the next relationship. A person cannot heal an old wound. A new person cannot heal an old wound, I meant to say. And know that solitude can become a classroom. That that solitude, that season of solitude, we can use it to heal. We can use to journal, to create, to learn, to build, pray, to discover ourselves. Many gifts are discovered in that season of solitude. Books are written in solitude. Businesses are started in solitude. Healing often happens in solitude. You know, and don't and feel free to please share, drop your comments. Show how you got through your season of being alone. What did you accomplish while being alone? This may help other people, honestly. And ask yourself, am I seeking love or am I seeking validation, healing, or distraction, purpose, or escape? Because loneliness does not have to become a prison. It can become a classroom. It can become a healing room. It can become a place where you can discover who you truly are. Because before we invite someone else into our lives, we must first learn to live within ourselves. We must and break these cycles and start growing within self. The unmarried, the single person can give more attention to Yahuah. 1 Corinthians 7:32 to 34. But I would give you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belongeth to Yahuwah, how he may please our Elohim. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Most High, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. Paul is not condemning marriage. He is saying that singleness can provide a unique opportunity to focus on spiritual matters. 1 Corinthians 7:7. For I would that all men were even as I myself, but every man have his proper gift of the Most High, Elohim. One after this matter, and another after that. Paul describes both marriage and singleness as a gift, not a punishment. We are to learn contentment in whatever seasons we're in. Philippians 4:11. Not that I speak in respect of what I want, for I have learned, and whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Contentment is a learned discipline. You know, instead of Anna the prophetess, who after becoming a widow spent her days in the temple serving and praying. So loneliness is not the same as being alone. And the scriptures proves it. But we have to want this healing. We have to seek what is in righteousness that we can do to fill these voids. So just remember, loneliness can cause us to accept what we would normally reject. Ignore red flags. Desperation often silences discernment. And attention is not the same as love. And seeking validation. Know your worth before asking someone else to define it. And healing breaks cycles. Hurt re- repeats them. So know that being alone is not the enemy, but unhealed loneliness is. Your season of solitude may be preparing you for something greater than you can see today. Use this time to heal. Use this time to grow. Use this time to discover who Yahuah created you to be. Because when you know who you are, you stop looking for someone else to tell you. Thank you for joining today. And if this conversation encourages you, please like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, continue to heal, continue to grow, and continue to seek wisdom. Peace and blessings and shalom.